Good evening, good afternoon, maybe good night, depending on where you're tuning in from, where in the world. Welcome to the Rugby Canada webinar series presented by DHL. My name is Jackie Titley. I'm the Manager of Training and Education with Rugby Canada. Very pleased to have you all here with us tonight, this evening with the Arrows, talking about a new professional pathway for Canada. Very exciting. Very glad to have you all with us. I will remind all the folks online that all of the Rugby Canada webinars we've done to date have been added to the Rugby Canada the Rugby Canada YouTube channel. So those are available for you to review, go and take a look at again, or to view for the first time if you missed them. I will also remind the folks online that there's a question function where you can type in any questions that you might have for this panel throughout the presentation. We will do about 30 to 45 minutes of presenting to start with, and then a bit of a Q&A at the end that I'll come back in to curate. But feel free to throw those questions in whenever they come to you throughout the presentation, and we'll do our best to get to all of them at the end. So once again, welcome to our chat with the Arrows. Here to talk to us a little bit about this, the history of the club and moving from Ontario Blues to Toronto Arrows, talking about a new professional pathway. We have Mark Winokur with us, who's the Vice President and General Manager of the Toronto Arrows. We also have Chris Silverthorne, who is the Director of Rugby. And we have Aaron Carpenter with us, who is the forwards and defense coach. So once again, really happy to have the three of you with us. Thanks very much for taking the time to present and share the journey of the Arrows so far. Excited to get into it. Without further ado, I will hand it over to Mark and Chris to get us going.
Thank you, Jackie. Thanks very much. And thanks everybody for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time. I know these are very strange times that we're all going through, and we really hope that everybody is safe and healthy and as happy as you can be under the circumstances wherever you are across the country. So wanted to take a little time to tell you kind of how the Arrows came to be, why they came to be, what we're trying to achieve, and how we're trying to achieve it. And I'll skip ahead to the end of the movie. And the end of the movie is we're really asking for you guys, everybody that's on this, this webinar, and everybody involved in the game in the country, anybody who even touches the game, to kind of become a talent identifier for us and be part of our system. Now I know, Rugby Canada is putting together a talent identifier network, which is great and much needed, and there'll be some really smart and capable and experienced people involved in that project. But it's going to take all of us. We're going to be the only professional team in the country for a little bit, and we can certainly talk about why that is later. But it's going to take all of us in the community to make sure that we're pushing Canadian athletes into professional rugby. We don't have the bandwidth, the budget, the means to get across this country and find out where all the talent lies. So we're going to kind of rely on you folks to help out. So the other thing I'll apologize for in advance is that this is a little bit Ontario centric. I understand that, and those of you living outside Ontario who are not Ontario fans, well, I'd ask you to sort of suspend disbelief maybe for the evening and put that aside and look at this as Canada's professional team and not so much a Toronto or an Ontario thing. For the time being. So anyway, without too much further ado, Chris and I will go through this little presentation, and then we'll pop it over to Aaron Carpenter at the end, and after that we can do some questions and comments if you like. So some of you may know this, but this was a World Rugby Initiative originally that started the Canadian Rugby Championship. Ontario were one of the teams involved. That was in the fall of 2008, and at that first meeting in November of 8, the IRB back then, said we see this as the first step towards professional rugby in North America. and we'll give you some money and you should be able to get a pro franchise going in 5 years, which, as I say here, is what people always say when they don't have to do the work. I don't think they understood the precarious position that rugby is in North America, but nonetheless. So the Blues were one of the 4 teams in the CRC, as many know. The Atlantic Rock, the Blues, the Prairie Wolfpack, and the BC Bears. And when we first started in our own experience, we had kind of middling success. I think we went 3-3 the first year and 3-3 the second year. And the challenge really was that there was just no team culture. Players didn't know, how to be a high performance athlete. They were just club guys that we were just, assembling and going out and doing stuff. Didn't understand video analysis, didn't understand strength and conditioning, diet, periodization, none of that. We kind of had to indoctrinate them into that. And after a couple of years, for one thing, we had fun, but for two, I think they started to understand that this was a different thing from their average club rugby, and that some of the teams we were playing against, we played against the USA national team, their select side, and beat them. We played against England counties and ran them close. So I think guys started to realize that these were the best games in North America on the given day, and competitive players wanted to be part of that. So when we first got going, and Silver will take over from after this slide, but we won 6 of the last 8 years of the CRC, 4 in a row. And the beginning of that was in 2012 was the first year. And we as the staff saw the culture start to emerge from the players who were driving it. And they were the ones that would carry this forward. Silver, you can carry on a little bit about that.
Yeah, for me, the biggest thing was really, if it wasn't for the Canadian Rugby Championships, there wouldn't be a Toronto Arrows. We wouldn't be where we are now, and as competitive as we are now. We are arguably one of the top teams in the MLR, and that's because of the CRC and the function the CRC did in the development of the Canadian player from where we were, say 10 years ago. And really from there was the support of Garrett John and Kieran Crowley, the 2 head coaches at the time. They were fully supportive, and that means that every top player in the country, didn't matter where you were, you played it. They were healthy. It didn't matter if you were a 7th player, 15th player. So the top 110 athletes in this country played against each other if they weren't on a pro contract. So it really was a platform for all the players that weren't pro, which is still the majority of the players in Canada, to play and to excel. So to me, that was one of the biggest things to go through, and it was a big commitment. It was, while it wasn't probably the best high performance environment, it was the best that we had. Outside of the national team, it was by far the best performance that we could put in with regards to high performance. Our guys in Ontario started the second week of January every year. We practiced in domes for the first 2 to 3 months, and then we were every Monday night until the end of the CRC. So the guys' commitment was there, and they were all switched on and knew that this was the best place. And what this really offered to a kid from Ontario, a player from Ontario, it was an opportunity to be seen by the national team and not have to move out to Victoria. It really was a legitimate shot for them to showcase that we can play rugby in Ontario, and also you don't have to go and play rugby out in BC. And to me, that was big for the Canadian players, and it kind of broadened the horizon for a lot of players that just couldn't physically get out there because of jobs, school, and commitments. It just gave them that opportunity to go and play against the top 100 athletes in the country. So it was a very big deal for all of us. And the commitment from the guys, I'm sure it's the same with all 4 of the CRC teams, but we had a car full from London come for 6 hours in a car every Monday night for 8 years. I mean, that just alone says that. And for a lot of years, it was a car from Ottawa. So if anyone knows the geography of Ontario, they're looking at 6 to 8 hours in a car for a 2-hour practice every Monday night to get to practice. And just that commitment alone just showed the kind of desire they had for the players. And people ask why Ontario was so successful over those winning 6 to 8 years. And it really was, we played more games than anybody else, and we were together more. Mark and the network created an environment there. We played probably double the games that anyone else played. in the CRC. We always had a spring season, which consists of two to three games, sometimes 4. We would go to New York and they come back here and we play, or England counties, or the British police played, and just those high level games that our players kind of developed at a higher level than some of the other areas did. And that was one of the biggest things. And it really was family, because the guys from Ontario all grew up together. We all played rugby together for the junior program growing up. I think we only have, of that group, only 2 players didn't play for Ontario at junior rugby of the entire program. Everyone else had gone through the whole system and kind of grown through the years and developed. Go ahead, this next slide there, Mark.
Yeah, this is so this was really kind of where the switch got flipped for us. 20th 2017, and we have it down to a specific date because we were playing the Glendale Raptors, who were the first team to declare that they were going into Major League Rugby. Their director of rugby, Mark Bullock, rung me in the winter and said, "Hey, we're looking for some games before we enter this league. We'll come up and have a run." We said, "Sure." They built it through that week. I think they were on their social media with a clip saying that this was going to be pros versus Joes because they were getting paid and we were just a bunch of guys. We'll see. So they came to Burlington on May 20th, and we won the game by a lot. I think it was something in the high 40s to something in the low 20s. And a gentleman came down out of the stands who I did not know at the time, introduced himself as Bill Webb, a local rugby fan and business person, and said, "Hey, if I can get you some money, me and a group of guys, could you put a team into this league to compete with these guys?" And I said, well, I'll paraphrase. I said, "Definitely yes." The word actually began with F, but and he was convinced enough by my instant reaction and just by seeing the guys and meeting some of them that night that, yeah, this could be something. So we were admitted to MLR in November of 2018. We had 77 days to put a team on the field. There wasn't a lot of time to think about, going outside the province or going outside the country to attract talent. So the sort of value proposition was that, we were going to put in a Canadian and an Ontario-based team into this league, and we were going to do well. And these things, here on this slide, to be a commercial, an on-field, and a developmental success, those are the 3 things that we're built on. And if we can't do those things, I think checks stop flowing and people stop working and we put our pencil down, because it's, this is super, super important for Canadian rugby in our view, and we have to do it the right way. We've got to play with Canadians, develop Canadians, be a place for Canadians to play. Obviously got to sell some tickets and win some games, which goes with it. But that's our mandate right there. And we look at that saying every single day. And the premise for building the team was that, we said the gamble was we're good enough as players and staff to compete in a professional league with our own guys. We don't need to go overseas and sign a bunch of people. And I have to confess to some sleepless nights going into the season, because we weren't 100% sure if that was true, but we found out pretty quickly that it was. And today, and this may be later in the presentation, but our roster, the last 2 years, we have had 85, 86, 87% of the players on the team are Canadian. The staff, with one exception, is Canadian. So, where we use foreign talent to fill gaps, the premise is Canadians are good enough to compete in professional rugby and be successful. And, I'm assuming most of you, if you're on here, probably know a little bit about the Arrows and have seen some of the games, hopefully on TV, but we won 15 of the 21 games we played up until close of play about a month ago, which was a pretty difficult moment for us, but it's difficult for everybody. And even more, I think, impressive is that 13 of those games have been played on the road. We only played 8 home games in our entire history and still have that record. So, that made it doubly tough for us to have the homestand canceled this spring, but we hope to see everybody out, at a pitch near you either later this year or early next. Silver?
For me, one of the biggest things we looked at is how do we turn what we had created with the Blues in a very amateur, semi quasi high performance setting into professional setting. And we're all new at this. And biggest thing is the first word is cohesion. One of the biggest things we have an advantage over all of the MLR teams is our guys have played the better part of 40 to 60 games together. Guys like Rob Brower have been in the same program for 10 years. Sean Windsor, those types. Even Lucas Rumbles, who's not very old, he's probably played 40 games with the same group of core guys, and that was the biggest thing. And that started with the staff as well. Our staff was really cohesive. We had to be together, and we didn't want to make any big changes. So Mark, myself, and Coco are the only three left of the original kind of when this thing started up. But Corey and Dave Butcher have been with us for the last 3 to 4 years. We brought them in, obviously, that was a good thing. And then the retirement of Carps was a great addition, because not only Carps was an Ontario boy, he played for the Blues. He'd been through the culture, been through understanding, and really brought that kind of knowledge to him of just being a retired professional, of how to make this to the players. And to be honest with you, I think he was Brower's roommate at university, so there's a bit of an age gap there. But you know, what do you do? And then the only coach we brought in was Peter Smith, because one of the things we did identify was as a weakness for us was our kicking game, which goes with our kicking skill and our game management. So we brought Peter Smith in as a skills coach to look at just basically is the kicking, and that was a big part of us is moving forward is to getting that. And then our players have all played together, so it was a big deal. So, and then the next thing here was just the player identification. Every region is a representative of the four. We have great depth in that. We have had to go offshore for a bit of talent. That really is to add some flair and to add a bit of culture as well, and to add a bit of professionalism. The people we brought in have really helped that way. And one of the biggest things too is, like to pat him on the back, is Mike Chu, probably one of the best contacts we've had, and one of Mark's biggest allies right now. Is we have gone away because, you know, how do you bring in a foreign player to that? And a lot of people, you bring in someone old that's really a veteran, and we've gone the other way, and we're bringing in the next level right below Super Rugby. All the kids that aren't quite making Super Rugby, that still want to learn, still want to play hard, and still want a desire to get better. That's who we're attracting, and that's who we want to bring in to us, to our team. And so he's created the partnership with Hurricanes with us, and that's where we identified the Sammy Malcolms and those types to come in and really be effective for us and really drive our culture. Because I think if you look at the people that have watched us play, the ones we brought in have been key, and what they have brought to practice. Because one of the biggest things for us was practices. Our guys didn't know how to be switched on to rugby for 8 hours. They'd only been switched on for 2 hours. And I think Carps, when he talks about it, maybe he'll talk a bit more, it was really frustrating for us as a staff, is we couldn't get a full day of practice out of them. It was the biggest thing. But it was all the guys that came from Mitre 10 and from Super Rugby, and that have really driven our guys to really work harder. And the ones that played, like Dan Moore, played overseas and just kind of kept going. And now I think this year we were far better at our practices and more efficient and really switched on. And that was been a big jump for us for that. So, so if you look at kind of who we have brought in, has been that kind of real kind of positive influence to us. But if you look at year one, we had another massive problem, and that was the AARC. We were going to lose between 8 to 13 players every week. I don't know if you guys realize this, but there was no one left home in our second week last year. The 23 players, that was it. There was no players left. If somebody twitched an ankle or something, we did not have a replacement, because you have to be signed in our salary cap. We really were that, though. So some of the signings we were was because they weren't involved with the ARC, and they weren't involved with Canada or Uruguay. And that was a big thing for us. The first year was that juggling act. For the first 5 weeks, we were missing anywhere from 8 to 13 players each week, and it was very hard to struggle through, but we got through it. And if you look at the guys on the screen here, those are probably 3 of our key impacts. Tommy Delavey, brought in this year, is a full Puma. His work ethic at practice and just leadership skills have been fantastic, and just kind of desire. And he's making our back row better, and the rest of the players we have, just by his example and just practice with him every week. Sammy's been top notch all the way through, and Gaston just got that flair that we kind of were missing, and we just kind of added those 3, and it's been fantastic for us moving forward. The next one, Mark. The last one, I know it's Ontario centric, and I apologize for that totally. But it really is the same wherever you are, if you're in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan. It really is about playing your youth rugby and really being identified. And I think it's important for us is that next generation. To me, the impact this is the 15, 16-year-old player now, because there is somewhere to go, somewhere to really to aim for and desire to be. And I think we really look at where we kind of be and where we're going to be on the way up. Is I think at that U18, U20 level for Canada, I think it's very important that we have a strong identification. We have just launched the Arrows Academy, led by Corey and Butch. That's kind of their main focus. And then they also work with the senior team, but their desire is to bring that forward. And I really, our goal by the next World Cup cycle is we're down to 1 or 2 imports, and the rest of us are Canadian. So we're at 95% Canadian, and that really is the goal and the desire of our mission in this process, is to be at that level. But that comes from the entire network of the country going forward. Obviously Ontario, because it's there, it's simple, and the money wise, because there's not a lot of money in the MLR right now. Hopefully that does improve, and it's easier to live at home with your parents. Last year, just to give you guys an example, was we had 7 of our players were still full-time university students. So they were juggling full-time university and being a professional athlete at the same time. So that was a great commitment by them. This year, I think we were down about 4. The rest of them graduated. And next year, I think we'll be down about 2 to 3 maybe. So that's where we are. And that's the biggest thing for where we're going forward. So we'll back over to Mark.
Yeah, so, I think as I sort of said at the beginning, this is a massive country. We found that out in the CRC when we flew to Victoria and flew back on a Sunday, got home on Monday morning, and then left for Newfoundland on Thursday morning, and we're in Newfoundland by Thursday night. And I think the staff went swimming in both oceans within 5 days, and some crazy amount of travel. So it's a massive country. We have a lot to do. So this isn't Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment. We're on a pretty tight budget. So how can we maximize our ability to scout players? And that's with people like everybody that's on this call tonight. And we're going to help you with that, because we're going to help you with templates and how to identify people and so on and so forth. But we're going to really do as much as we can to engage with the entire Canadian community, because this is your professional team for the foreseeable future. And I appreciate that not everybody is a Toronto fan of in any way, shape, or form, but I think you got to look at this as almost like the Raptors are Canada's team, or the Jays are Canada's baseball team. We're Canada's rugby team for now, and we hope that everybody will support us, but also we're trying to give you a reason to support us, and that's because we're developing Canadian athletes. So and this is where you could really help, is by identifying kids, not just, oh, hey, this kid scored 4 tries in his game, or that kid can run really fast. But there's and I think most of us know this, there's something, sometimes you can just tell. You can just tell a kid has the dedication, the personality, the strength, the speed, the athletic ability, all those things in a package, and they don't come along every day. But when they do, most people can, anybody that's involved in rugby can usually spot it, and we're hoping that you guys will be able to do that kind of thing for us. There's a picture of Brock Webster there to your left, a young Ontario kid who he's still a teenager and he's got a big future ahead of him, and Tay Paris, who I've known since he was 15 years old, but I think that the first time I saw him play, it was, he's got what it takes. So and as Chris said, listen, it would be our goal, it would be great if we had a 100% Canadian roster that could win the MLR Shield. That would be awesome. We'll sing "Oh Canada" right there in whatever U.S. stadium that we win it in. We're not quite there yet. We're still at still having to bring in 5 or 6, but in the next World Cup cycle, we'd love to have it be 100% Canadian. And in our area, and of course, the advantage of having the whole country to pick from, we have more good rugby players and athletes here than any of the other MLR teams, certainly in their local catchment areas. Some of them don't even bother to go out and look. They just get on the phone to New Zealand or South Africa or England. We're not like that. And we want to just make sure that we maximize that talent and give them all a chance to play professional rugby in their home country. So yeah, I mean, I don't drive it home, but I think that's basically the theme. We had just started an academy based one night a week in Guelph and one night a week in Kingston with about 30 athletes that we're starting to identify for future Arrows pathway. We had just got that underway when this mess that we got ourselves in developed. So, but it's certainly something we'll return to just as soon as it's safe to do, and that's for players who are younger, usually on the university pathway and don't want to move out to British Columbia and give up that university pathway, or don't want to go here or go there. Keep them at home, keep them in school, keep them doing, keep their education pathway intact, but let them also develop professional rugby as an option as well. And that's gotten tremendous uptake at the beginning. But, again, we can only afford to identify 28 players for that. There's got to be, another 100 who are close to that level, and we need you to help us identify those. So before we go over to Carps, we'll push the questions off till Carps does his piece. But, if there are any questions that you want to ask tonight, go ahead. If you want to ask them offline, you can go to our website, torontoarrows.com. All of our email addresses are on there, and feel free to reach out anytime about anything. We might not get to it that day, but we'll get to it just as soon as we can. So I thank you very much for listening to that part. Turn it back to Jackie to turn over to Carps, and he'll tell you about his story.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Chris. We do have quite a few questions coming in, so we will have time to get to them. I'll ask folks just to hang on to those for another few minutes, and as we transfer over and hear from Aaron about transitioning from being a professional player overseas to coaching with the Canadian team in the MLR.
Yeah, listen, thanks for having me speak to you guys. It's an honor to obviously speak to aspiring coaches and to share what I feel like my pathway has been, and that's what I've been asked to speak on tonight. So I'll just get into it. Like, the first one is transitioning from the rugby player to the coach. So how do you transfer from playing at a high level and only focusing on your task and your goals, and now you're being asked to focus on a multitude of things? For myself now, it's the forward play and the defense, and now I'm being asked to focus on all those things. And I found that it's not an easy answer to give to you guys, because I found it an easier transition than I've talked to a lot of other people, and maybe they've had it, because I feel like I captained the team a number of times, and I always felt like I had that ability to see what the coaches were trying to get us to accomplish from their tactics and ideas. So it made it a little easier for me to jump that fence, as they would say, and just be able to see things now in that perspective, and how to develop a player and how to get the best out of them. And so I had an easier transition, but I just want to talk through some of the ways that helped me get to that point. Obviously, retirement was the first step. I obviously wanted to play as long as I could keep up with all the guys and all the young guys out there. All the guys were giving me a bit of heat, saying play for 100, see if you can get there. But at the end of the day, then it comes down to, am I really helping my team anymore? And is there a younger guy than me that's pushing at the envelope, right? So I made those decisions. I obviously had, because of injury, it forced my hand a little bit, and not everybody gets to choose when they finish in the game, and those that do are lucky, right? So I didn't have that opportunity, but I always knew that at some point I wanted to keep rugby in my life, because it had given me a lot. So once I was finished, I was adamant that I wanted to coach. I wanted to try it anyways, see how it would go. and that comes to the Toronto Arrows. Originally, when I came back, we were still the Blues, and I helped out with the Ontario Blues, helped them win that last CRC, and then that transitioned into Ontario Arrows and Toronto Arrows. When I retired, I got the phone. Well, I think it was Andrew Ferguson. It's like, I think Mark Winokur wants to talk to you, as Andrew was one of the former, was a member of the Ontario Blues. And so the first thing I do is give Mark a call, and I think this bodes to how you hold yourself in your daily environment, right? So Mark had obviously worked with me with the Canadian team. He had known who I was. I'd been through the Ontario systems, and then he thought, like, we're starting this thing up, and we want to bring somebody back that has a lot of experience at an international level, at a professional level, that he can come and make our environment better. And if I was a dick to Mark during my a time with the national team, I guarantee he wouldn't have given me a call or asked me to speak to me. So he asked to speak to me and gives me the opportunity to come back and better myself as a coach, and really work to starting to make these connections with players and start to work on my philosophies as a coach, which is, if you listen to some of the best coaches in the world, that's one of the big rocks that you got to set first, is who are you as a coach, and what are your most important attributes, and what kind of team do you want to be, right? And what kind of path do you want to follow? So like, my view of coaching is that it's just like it's a constant feedback loop, right? You do something, you measure it, you analyze, you correct, and you repeat, and you just try and continually go up the ladder, right? So with every player that comes into our environment, this is the kind of things I'm doing, and creating just profiles of each player, right? And then being able to feed back to them 2 or 3 times a year on where I think their skill levels need to improve in certain areas, and how they can become better rugby players. Because at the end of the day, that's the transition to get the most out of these players for me. And then just from how I build my coaching philosophy, from what I've done, I've just, like, I had a good Clive Griffiths once, like, he was telling me, he was the former defense coach for the Canadian national team, that I should write everything down as I'm going through it, because you never know when you need it. And I started to take some ideas down as I was going through my career, because you take little bits from from everywhere around you as you've gone through it. And if you just let it pass you by and go, I'm in the moment, I'm just playing rugby, then it's going to be past you, and you're not going to have that opportunity to pull some of that back if you got a pretty poor memory like myself. So I've had some of those notes. I got about 4 or 5 notebooks that I've just taken over the years, and that just brings it all into my philosophy. Is I got a lot from the coaches I've used over the time. I take pieces of defensive structures that I thought worked when I played, right? So I would write something down, and then get that from the coaching experience. Then I take it from international experience, going to World Cups and watching some of the teams we played against, and what they do, and how they run their systems. And then just trying to make the best environment possible, the logistical experiences, working with great administrators that make things look easy, and how we can make that better for our team. And then just teammates, some of the best knowledge you get from teammates. We talked about bringing in professional players and international experience. That is absolutely essential. You look at some of the players that have made the jumps, like a Cole Keith for us this year. Last year, he was playing behind Morgan Mitchell, an international we brought in. This year, he's seen what he needs to do to get to that level that Morgan was at, and he's pushed himself into that category. And that's what we're trying to do. And hopefully some of our young back rowers will see what the product Tommy De La Vega is putting on the product every training session, and they'll jump into that echelon of rugby player. You know, it's all about creating those environments that just continually push us to places we never thought we could go. And that's a really important belief for myself. And there's lots of ways to coach, and obviously I've decided to be a collaborative environment coach versus the authoritarian environment. There's lots of different theories on that, and it's just about knowing yourself and studying and understanding your group and how to get a lot out of them, and working together with them, right? I take ideas from players. At some point I have to say, this is the way we're going forward, but I'm never against any player coming to me and going, well, I think we should do this. Well, what if we did this, right? And that just helps them feel part of the team, and helps them feel like they can add something to the environment and then have some ownership over it. And then just using the right tool for the right job, and then embracing those values. And then this goes along the same leadership styles. Like I don't want to be a coach that makes all the decision. I understand. I've been in the fires of the game. Pictures change. Stuff happens at very fast speeds. So we gotta trust our players a little bit, right? And then make it an environment where we can all come to the consensus together. And then at the end of the day, Chris will tell you, Mark, we're just trying to make people better humans. Like it's not only on the rugby field that the growth is necessary; it's away from it as well. And then just for myself, who I feel like I need to be is the person that leads by example. If there's any work that needs to be done, I'm the first guy in line to do it. If 100 hours of video has to be watched, I'm watching that 100 hours of video. I'm not sitting on a chair and just yelling at somebody else to do it and then taking their information. If something needs to be coded, I'll code it. Like I'm not jumping any steps because first of all, I love this job and I love rugby, so I want to make it the best that it possibly can. And that's for the Toronto Arrows, for Canadian rugby. Like those two were telling you earlier, we're trying to grow the sport, and we're not only Ontario centered. We will look everywhere, and the players got to be good enough. They have to have the potential to be able to come in and make it a better environment, help us win games, because that's what pro rugby is about. And that just is my personal philosophy on what it is. I just did a quick presentation because I was just talking about transitioning and coaching and where I sit along those axes. So yeah, thank you very much for listening, and we can get to the question period now.
Wonderful. Thanks very much to all three of you. It's been quite interesting to hear each of your journeys and the journey that the Arrows have taken so far. We do have a few questions that I'll get to, and certainly, folks, if there are others through our discussion, please put them into that question box, and we will get to as many as we can. So first of all, really, I think this is a question for any of you, but perhaps Aaron can field this one from strictly from a coaching perspective and working with the athletes. It's a question around alignment with the Canadian national team programs and style of play. So is there, since you are looking at the Arrows as part of the pathway to the national team, is there an effort to align the style of play, and does Arrows attack mirror some of what we're trying to do as Team Canada in our attack, for example?
Yeah, so to answer that question, we're in constant feedback with Kingsley, his groups that are coaching, and they give us, like, he gives me feedback all the time and ideas and stuff we're trying to implement. But I think the biggest thing for me is what I learned playing overseas is, like, you would go to one team and then you go to another, like the themes are all very similar, but like the plays change, right? Rugby is a very simple game, and like I think making you a better rugby player is knowing different systems, right? And being able to adapt to them as quickly as possible. So if we align all the way through, then we only know one way of playing rugby. Whereas if we're adaptable to a different way of playing rugby, we're going to be better in the end. And that's about building smarter rugby players that can switch onto that, right? Rather than being told from under 6 all the way to on senior national men's team that we got to do this way. There's 100 ways to skin the cat, and I think that's a big belief of mine. So I don't see that happening, and it also allows people like myself, like coaches, to have their own identity and build themselves, rather than if I'm told I got to do this like this, then I can't go out of it, and there's no creativity within the coaching.
Mm-hmm. I love that answer. Thanks, Aaron. It's interesting to hear and exciting, because I do agree. I think that if we can prepare our players to be able to react and adapt and play a variety of different styles or systems, then they can only get better. So that's quite exciting. We also had some questions around your scouting systems and if there are plans or what the scouting looks like across the country, what you would like it to look like in the future. And if someone were interested in, in setting up a contact overseas, maybe in the UK, how would you go about setting up those connections for, to look at sending players over to Canada? Or is that something that you would want to look at establishing some connections and contacts overseas?
Well, Silver, maybe you could take the Canadian piece. I'll take the overseas piece first. But so as the theme was, we're really not looking to heavily recruit overseas. I probably get, I would say I've had 100 CVs sent to me in the last month. Now I know it's because people are sitting home and have some time on their hands, but it's an attractive option for overseas players to come over here. But we have to look at what does that do for us? What Canadian are we going to put out of a job for some player from England or France or wherever to play in his position? So we're pretty selective about our overseas recruiting. If we look, we say, hey, we're going to need a loose head prop. So we'll use our already existing network of people that we know, and we know lots of people because we've been in the international game for a while. So we'll be pretty specific in our asks, and we'll still get more information than we need. So setting up an overseas network is not a priority. Setting up a Canadian network is, and Chris can tell you more about that.
Sure, thanks, Mark.
Our big focus right now really is the Canadian university system, because we think we kind of have every player available right now, or almost every player that's graduated from university. We kind of have taken that, but if we can get those 18 to 22-year-olds right now and look at them and really try to handpick the best of that system, I think that's the best thing to do. I think still we need another layer, because what does a player do who graduates university who isn't good enough to play in the MLR for the Arrows? How do they get to that professional level? And I would like to see some form of the CRC back. How that looks and the expense of it, I know it's terrible. But I think that's what ideally, I think what Mark and I have talked in the past is we release all the players, they play in the CRC, and at the end they're playing for a contract for next year. And that to me would be the best system for us and for the Canadian system, is how these players, because it's a 6-month off season, is turned 2 of those months into almost like an open trial where you've got to play for your home territory and you play. But that system is a couple years off at the earliest for sure. But that's where I'd like to be right now. The Ontario University system, or the university system in Canada, and the Canadian Rugby University Championships is probably the highest level we have nationally right now. Mm-hmm. And there is still some clubs. All the players from Ontario that were released from today are going home and playing for the clubs when club season does start back up.
Mm-hmm. And there are a few, building off that question, maybe would you envision that CRC competition to capture those players who maybe aren't in university? Maybe they've not chosen to go to university for various reasons. And for your academy program, what kind of scouting in high schools is going on, or what does that look like in Ontario and across the country?
I think regards to high school, it has to be the Canada U20s. So I think you have to play for your province at the U19 level. I think that's an area where we're really starting to look, really focus on that area and identify those top 25, 30 athletes at that U19 level to play for Canada for U20s. And then from there through the national team and the Pacific Pride as well. I think that is the pathway for them for sure. But yeah, the player that doesn't go to university, what happens to them? Because the CRC doesn't exist anymore. And that's something that we need to address as a country, and then also as the Arrows. It's not just us, but as a country, we need to make sure that a player in Newfoundland has that same opportunity that a player in BC does, or Ontario or Alberta or Saskatchewan, because there's great athletes everywhere. If you look at the makeup over the years, we're from all corners of the country, not just the mainstays.
Wonderful. And you mentioned the men's university championships as quite a good opportunity for you to scout talent. How integral has it been to get that up and running and established, and to be able to be there and see the talent across the universities across the country?
we're not part of the planning of it, but obviously it's a vital part, and I think we're a big supporter as the Arrows organization. Bill and the ownership group have put a lot of money into that to make that a success, and it is growing still. I think there's still a big step for them to become a youth sport. Once it becomes a youth sport on the men as well as the women, I think that's a big step. And I think that's where, if we could do anything to assist and make that step happen, that would be massive for our sport across the country. Because funding changes at university if it's a youth sport.
Absolutely.
I think
Absolutely.
that's how you feed your academy and how you feed the Pacific Pride. And it's going to take a pretty special player to come out of that university, jump right into MLR, right? So it's about giving them a path, which we never had before, and being able to jump into that path and really have the opportunity to grow.
And so that they have a stepping stone. You mean once they come out of
Exactly.
university? Absolutely. And so there's a little bit more of a question around the professionalism and the environment that the players are in, and some curiosity around what that environment looks like. How professional is it in the league at the moment? Does it vary across teams? Are these players also working other jobs in the off season, or are they able to to sustain themselves solely as being a professional rugby player?
We were
Well, I mean,
27.
Yeah. So the simple math there is it's a salary cap league. Each team has $500,000 to pay their roster. If you do the math and say, well, I need to have 22, 26, 28 guys at training every day, it's nobody's driving a Ferrari to training. In terms of professionalism, the full-time guys are full-time during the season. We have them in training and at video and at rehab and at weights and everything else. On a daily basis, they can't really don't have the ability to work a full-time job during the season. And during the off season, yeah, they're probably, they're certainly free to pursue other careers, but with the salaries the way they are, it's not a full-time. It's a 6-month full-time, I would guess would be the description. In terms of the other teams, it started off a little closer to semi-professional than professional, probably the exhibition year that we did, and then a little bit maybe into the beginning of last year. But I think, we all, Chris and Aaron and everybody on our staff, saw that this year it pretty closely resembles professional rugby. And I think all the teams across the league, not all, but most, have ramped up to the point where they've got at least 20 to 24 players in a daily training environment at least 3 to 4 days a week.
Excellent. Very cool. And hopefully, once we get back to playing and back to something relatively normal, are there any plans to maybe move home games, play in different venues, maybe outside of Ontario, and build that fan base, build that really Canadian backing for the club?
There are. We during our exhibition season, we did play a game in Halifax and had a lot of fun. And I talked to somebody today about that, actually. And our philosophy for the rest of this season and before next season is when it's safe to play and when it's safe for people to be involved in the playing of the game, we're going to do it. And if it's Halifax, great. If it's Victoria, great. We're talking about playing a preseason game in Victoria next January, all things being equal. So, listen, it's a very expensive operation and there's not tons of cash sitting around to just, pick up and move the operation around the country. But we would absolutely love the chance to play in other cities and connect with everybody across the country as long as it's feasible to do that.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, we seem to have answered as many questions as we've had so far, so that's been great. Folks, we do still have a few minutes, so if there are any lingering questions that you're holding on to, please drop them into that question box. And while we're giving you a minute or so to do that, what I will do is just remind everyone of our next webinar that's coming up on Tuesday, which is Successful Event Organization with Jen Smart. I will also remind everyone that we are on all rugby activities ban, but that there will be an update coming from Rugby Canada no later than June 30th. And I would like to say a sincere thank you to the three of you for joining us tonight and sharing your journeys, sharing your experiences and your plans for rugby, for the Arrows, and for professional rugby in Canada. I think it certainly is a bright future once we get back on the pitch. And I will maybe open it up to the three of you if you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with the group.
Carps, you want to go first?
No, just huge thank you for myself. Really enjoyed doing this, and I just any chance we get to engage with the entire rugby community, we're taking that opportunity. Bill, Mark, all of it, we've tried to be the most accessible rugby team in MLR, so open training sessions, all that kind of stuff. We're engaging people to come and learn and try and get better. Doing stuff like this, doing webinars. I did one the other day with Ontario Rugby. Just trying to share some of the knowledge I have so that we can all, you're an accumulation of all your experiences throughout life. So, and you try and promote that once you get to where you are. So I'm trying to get some of my thoughts into people's heads so that they start doing it some of the ways I see it. So thank you very much.
Silver?
You're welcome.
I just want to thank you for the opportunity. It's fantastic. I'm proud of my Canadian pathway. I'm a true Canadian. I'm from Lindsay, Ontario. So it can be done. And I think it's very important that we have this opportunity now as a Canadian to obviously play, but also to coach professional rugby. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Wonderful. And we do have one question coming through, actually. Any advice that you've been, or any communication with your players, advice on how to stay motivated, stay together, stay healthy mentally, physically, emotionally through this time? Any thoughts on there? Coaches, I think, and others looking to support the athletes that they work with as well.
Yeah, the guys are pretty good.
I think
yeah, go ahead, Silver.
all our players have a daily workout. They call them prison workouts right now. They love and hate them. And then we brought in a psychologist to speak to the players about 3 weeks ago, and he gave them some ideas and some pathways to kind of just don't go down the hole of the internet, and kind of stay off the news as much as you can, be active as best you possibly can, and just stick with the positives.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic for all of us. The staff are on it as well. And I've taken the kind of cheat sheet was given, and it was been fantastic for us. And it is a tough time. It's a different time. None of us have ever been through this. So stay positive, and it will end, and we'll be all here. So
I also think on a point that you never from a coaching perspective, you never had the amount of stuff that's going on right now. We're trying to stay engaged with each other, and this is part of the process. But you got webinars coming out from Stuart Lancaster. You got really influential people giving you a lot of information, and no better time than right now that's what I'm trying to do with myself, just better myself and come up with different aspects. And I think from a player's perspective, you don't have anything holding you back, so you can go out there and work on whatever your weakness is or whatever your coach has been telling you, and you have nothing holding you back other than being with other people. So you can work on those little parts of the game that you haven't been able to, and then just staying somehow trying to stay connected with your family, but then also with keeping the players connected. We've just done a series of ends of season interviews, and then just trying to have a call every once in a while just to make sure everybody's still doing all right.
Nice. Thanks, Aaron. Final thoughts, Mark?
Yeah, listen, just to echo what they said, thank you so much for listening. I hear there were decent numbers, and we really are, trying to be as open a book as we can. You can reach out to us through, torontoarrows.com anytime, any questions, any thoughts, any comments. Please reach out. Don't be shy about it. This is, it's our team in the sense that, we're paid to run it, but it's Canada's team. It'll be a while before there's another one. We want to be as successful as we can. We would like nothing better than to go out next year and win the MLR Shield and take it on a cross-country tour and maybe have a beer and a laugh with everybody on here and across the country. So it's super important for us that you guys are behind us, and we really appreciate it, and very honored to have been here and talk to you all tonight, and look forward to connecting just as soon as this stuff's over.
Once again, thanks very much, Mark, Chris, and Aaron. It was lovely to have you on. Everyone stay safe. Have a great afternoon, evening, and we will be back next Tuesday.
Thank you.
Good night.